Hey, deserving listeners, it's just me today. I thought I would answer patron emails. This first patron email is from patron Julia. She writes, I've recently gotten a job working with kids 12 to 17 with mental health issues in a residential treatment facility, and I'm having a bit of trouble knowing my place with them. These kids have been through an insane amount of trauma, and as I am not their parent nor their therapist, I'm having a hard time making a place for myself. I care about them a lot, and I want them to know that I care, and I don't want to be the bad guy. It also doesn't help that my coworkers are usually just sitting on their phones, and it seems that me and them aren't on the same page since they don't really care to be there. Also, since I am new, the kids don't respect me and don't listen to my directions. One girl said to me that it's because they don't know me and they have trust issues. I have knowledge about attachment issues, thanks to your deep dive, but I've recently learned about reactive attachment disorder, and I'm not too familiar with it. So, is there any advice you can give me? What's my place with these kids? How should I treat them? How do I make them respect me more? End of email. Yeah, well, first off, just a little bit about reactive attachment. Often this is applied, I've talked about this before in other episodes, often this is applied when someone, a teenager has... It's over-applied, is what I'll say, because the DSM doesn't have a full array of labels for people with issues. The DSM privileges certain issues for humans that involve suffering and what we might consider disordered behavior. It doesn't include all of suffering. There's a lot of suffering that's excluded from the DSM. So it could be reactive attachment that you're running into with the kids, but it's probably a lot of other things, just like they have been treated badly. They're going through grief. They have a lot of really entrenched defense mechanisms that are self-defeating, and there's no real DSM diagnosis for that sort of thing. So, be mindful of that. But you're not a clinician, so it doesn't really matter what we're talking about here, because you really shouldn't be concerning yourself too much with the condition since you're not a clinician. So any advice that I can give you? Yeah, the first is to recognize that these are really tough places to work. You're working 12 to 17 mental health issues, residential treatment facility. Now, given the fact that you're saying that your coworkers, it doesn't help that your coworkers are usually just sitting on their phones. I'm guessing based on that it's probably a larger facility. I'm guessing, 10 to 20 kids or something. Usually that's the case. That's a really, really tough place to work. I've worked in facilities like that. A lot of times what you're doing is damage control. The damage is so great that the kids come in with such high needs. And as that one person told you, they have trust issues and they have a lot of legitimate anger and transference with you, especially if you're there really trying to connect with them. They might begin to transfer a lot of their feelings from their parents and other people onto you. So even when things are going well, they might be disrespecting you. So it's a tough place to work, and the expectations have to be reflective of that reality. A lot of times you're watching train wrecks happen before your eyes. It's very stressful. Like you'll see a kid that you just see has been pushed around by the system. I mean, usually why kids land themselves in these kind of residential treatment facilities is because their behavior is either so out of control that the state has determined that they will house them because if they stay with their parents, things will go really badly, as they have been for years. Or their parents can't house them, and the kids have sort of blown out of foster care. So usually the kids that end up in these residential treatment facilities, if you're in the United States, are some of the most behaviorally challenged, what we'll say, kids that exist in your community. Another way to put them is that they're very oppositional. They're prone to, aggressive or problematic behaviors, over-sexualized, drug use, addiction, overreactivity, just lots of things. Now, it's possible that that's not the population you're working with, but I suspect that it is. Deeply entrenched eating disorders and burgeoning borderline. There's just a lot of difficulty. Teenagers are tough anyway, but with this, it's even rough. It's literally 100 times worse. So you just have to lower your expectations and recognize that you're in a very, very difficult situation, that it wouldn't be unusual for you to see no improvement in any of the people that you're working with. Often these people are marginalized: racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, poverty. They're in gangs. They're, heavy drug use, dealing, mental illness, absent parents, criminal problems. Usually it's several of these things. So a lot is working against you. Also, you mentioned that your coworkers don't care. That is rough. The times when I have worked in residential treatment facilities, everyone really cared. The coworkers were very good at what they did. And I guess this was before they had phones, before you had mobile phones. So there wasn't anything to do, and people had to work, I guess. So there's that. But when I worked in these facilities, I was young. I was like 24, and I really relied on these more experienced people, and I just followed their lead. And I never got the respect from the kids the way these more seasoned workers did. So there's that. So that's going to be tough. If you're the new person and the more experienced people don't seem to care and they're on their phones all the time, that's going to be a tough one. It's a big burden you're taking on yourself that I don't necessarily think is fair to you. So, do what you can, but lower your expectations. Watch your burnout, because you're no good to them if you're burning out. You're no good to them if you quit. Also, don't let your guard down unless you know you can take it. These kind of kids, sometimes they know just where to hit you. When I worked in one treatment facility, it was just for like 5 kids. And this one African-American girl blasted me. I don't even remember what she said to me, but it was literally 25 years ago, and I can remember her face. I remember where we were. It was a renovated split-level house in Linwood, Everett area here in Seattle. And I was, just like you, I was, eager and trying and felt insecure and didn't really have the respect of the kids, and just felt for my 8-hour shift, I was just like barely holding on. And this girl who had a sharp tongue with everyone else turned her attentions on me, and I was in the crosshairs, and she blasted me with something, and I just started crying. And I'm not that sort of person. I don't just like tear up in the middle of, but she got me so hard. And I remember after that moment, and I've talked about this before, that I realized that unless I toughen up, I'm not going to survive in this profession. This is when I was training to become a therapist. And so I was, getting low-level jobs in sort of the field. And this was one of them. And I said, if I'm going to be working with teenagers in my career, I got to like toughen up. And I remember what I did is I said, I can't be like I am normally. I can't be open. I have to be careful. These are people who can't really be trusted. You can't trust them with your heart. So don't let your guard down unless you can take it, because you don't want to suffer in that way. It doesn't mean you don't have compassion, because you do. It doesn't mean you don't have empathy, because you do. But you don't put your whole ego on the line, if that makes any sense. You're asking another question: what's your place with these kids? What's your role? I don't know. You tell me. Like, what's your job description say? What does your supervisor want you to do? You're not a therapist, so I'm guessing you're there to watch them, maybe react when something bad happens, or contact the appropriate people when something bad happens, or I don't know, just facilitate mealtime and make sure they stay in their rooms when they're supposed to be in their rooms doing homework or something. Like, usually that's the kind of responsibilities that you're supposed to be doing. But you're telling me that the kids don't respect you. And what it sounds like to me, based on your email, is that you have a terrible supervisor. Your supervisor should be telling you what your role is. Your supervisor should be telling you how to gain their respect. Your supervisor should be actually the one protecting you from the kids. Your supervisor should be the one facilitating your integration into the system. You really should be asking your supervisor these questions. And from the sound of it, you don't have a good supervisor. So, maybe your supervisor is one of the people on the phones. I don't know. But you're in a kind of a doomed situation if your supervisor is terrible and your coworkers are terrible. You're doomed. Like the whole situation is doomed. Depending, maybe the best thing to do is for you to go on your phone too. Maybe that's the homeostasis of the group. It's like, well, it's best if we just kind of lay low and stay calm and let them work the stuff out on their own and don't have a lot of fraternization between the staff and the clients. I don't know, but the fact that you are new and you're asking all these questions indicates to me that there's not good leadership. The next question you have is, how should you treat them? Well, one, you shouldn't quote unquote treat them because you're not a clinician. But if you're asking like, how do you react to them? Which is a big difference, right? If you're a clinician, you have the training and the expertise around like conceptualizing the problem, engaging the person in the treatment plan, engaging in that treatment plan. You are not part of that system. Now, if there is someone who is in charge of the treatment, maybe there's an on-site therapist or a therapist that's involved with the kids, you want to go to that clinician and your supervisor, I guess, to say like, what's my role regarding what I'm supposed to, am I supposed to be helping them with their trauma? Am I supposed to be helping them respect people more? Am I supposed to make them feel, how am I know we're supposed to be helping on some level, like what am I supposed to be doing and how do I do it? So, but in general, like if I was to answer a question like how should you react in general to kids like this, it depends because it depends on the kid. I worked with a wide variety of kids back in the day, both in homes and in clinically. In general, you can't go wrong by being a stable presence, meaning that you don't give up, you don't overextend yourself, you don't end up yelling at them, you don't end up pulling away from them. You're there, you're stable. When they push your buttons, you know the right thing to say where it doesn't escalate the situation. You know when to ask for help, for other staff members. The other thing is if you're really dedicated to helping these kids, like don't give up because it can be very demoralizing given what you're talking about. So if you can, try not to give up and reach out to them. Don't assume that because they're, snotty teenagers or they're having trouble or they're not following your directions. Don't assume that means that they aren't desperate for you to care about them and notice them. Often these kids are, more immature than other kids their age, but they try to act tough. There's a shit ton. Teenagers in general act tough, but particularly these kids can act tough. Not always, but so it helps to see them accurately, which is that they're suffering greatly, that they're immature, meaning that they haven't been given a chance to mature, and that parts of them are still 2 years old, 5 years old. And if you see them that way, then it helps to conceptualize them accurately, which helps you to know what to do. Like if you have a 17-year-old who is refusing to, pick up their stuff from the living room or something, and you're now it's tempting to look at that. Well, he's 17, he's almost an adult. He should be able to do this kind of stuff. Well, emotionally, in some moments of the day, he might be a 3-year-old. And so we don't ask when we ask a 3-year-old to pick up their stuff, we understand that they might have an emotional meltdown, which might make it hard for them to do that, and we take it easy on them. It doesn't mean that we don't, stay dedicated to them picking up their stuff, but it means we're a little bit more accommodating. And so the 17-year-old could have a, tough guy, 17-year-old version of a 3-year-old meltdown. And if you recognize it, then it helps to sort of cope with it. Because if he lashes out to you, be like, well, he's immature and he feels threatened, or, he hasn't had enough sleep today or something. And with all the trauma that they've been through and all the transference that they're going to do to you, you just have to, again, just see that and not overreact to it. At the very least, not to take it personally, and at best, then, to be more attuned to their feelings. You can even say things like, so I must be really frustrating to you right now, or you seem like you really don't want me to bother you about this task right now. Or, I understand that you really don't want to do this. I get that. I'm with you on that one. However, it's a rule that everyone picks up their stuff in the living room. So it'd be really helpful. You could be a really, helpful person if you did that for me right now. And then you ask, how do I make them respect me more? God, that is a tough one. Your supervisor should not only be helping you with that, but should actually be modeling that for you, should be buffering, you and the kids. If you've never been trained in that, it is a tough thing. I mean, wrangling kids in high school, just, non-behaviorally challenged 12-year-olds in high school, that is a specialized skill. The ability to control a group of teenagers is a very, very specialized skill. And I can relate to being thrown to the wolves like that before. Early in my career, I'm, 27 years old, and the agency I worked at, they would just send me to schools, and I would run these groups for behaviorally challenged kids in school. So I would get the 15 most rebellious, acting outest kids in all of the high school. I did one at Linwood High School. I did one at Sacagawea Middle School down in Federal Way. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I was barely out of my teens myself. I had, no experience corralling a bunch of kids, particularly kids who were challenging. And I was just making it up as I went along. And I remember one time I was just completely out of control of this one group. And there was these two teenage girls who were very vocal. And one of the girls, I just turned to her and I was just like, you seem to be interrupting everything I do. You seem to make sure that everything I do doesn't work. So today you're going to run the group. Because I was just frustrated. I'm just like, I can't take it anymore. Like, why am I doing this? Fuck my life. I'm not getting paid. I was getting paid $13 an hour, and I'm just like, I'd much rather be back at the office doing my regular family therapy stuff. Like, this is awful. And so I just turned to her. I was like, okay, next hour and a half, you're in charge. We're supposed to be doing anger management today, so you do it. And I thought it was just going to turn into a shit show. And at that point, I was just like, I don't care. What are they going to do? Fire me? I don't care. Like, this sucks. And so I handed over, and she turned on a dime and became extremely responsible and led a very, very good meeting. And everyone respected her because they knew her, and she had a sharp tongue, and she got everyone in line. And she, it wasn't a very buttoned up group therapy session, but it was much better than the way I was running it. And from that point forward, she was in charge of the group. And I just was kind of like an advisor to her. And I did not think that was going to happen. And if you would have asked me, like, that one girl, and do you think you could hand over the group to her? I'd be, no way. She would take the reins and run everyone into the ground. Like, she's so disrespectful. She's so immature. She's so terrible. Why would I hand the reins over to her? That's like the worst thing ever. But it totally worked. And it's one of those things of just like, one, getting creative, two, having faith in kids, because a lot of the times the way they're acting is because they've never been respected. And so why would they respect other people if they've never been respected? And so part of gaining their respect is to be respectful of them. And by me handing over the group, I think it was respecting her authority, and then she was okay with me. Anyway, so yeah, it's tough. It's tough to get them to respect you. Again, your supervisors should be helping with that. It depends kid by kid. Some kids need a firm hand. Some kids need a soft hand. Some kids will never respect you no matter what you do. But in general, there's some key elements. One is don't get rattled. Like, be professional. Don't have any meltdowns. Don't, throw your hands up in the air the way I did and say, like, I can't take this anymore. Like, just, stay calm. That's a big thing, because as you lose your cool, they will, one, lose their cool, and two, they will just lose respect for you. These kinds of kids, generally speaking, respect people who can withstand their bullshit. So it doesn't mean you have to take it. It doesn't mean you have to, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to fight back. But it just means that, you don't like crumble under the pressure. You can sort of laugh it off. Like, one strategy, again, it depends because there's so many different types of situations. But let's say, you're trying to get control and one of the kids like talks back at you. There's a lot of different strategies, but one of the strategies is just to be like, yeah, I get it. You're trying to make jokes, but I still need you to do this. So, you just stay the course. One of the kids makes fun of your outfit. Instead of like trying to justify, hey, and getting rattled and hurt by that, you're just like, haha, yeah, very fun. Maybe there's 5 kids laughing at you, and you just got to be like, okay, I get that you're making jokes about my outfit. I guess I'm not on the cutting edge of fashion. Who would have thunk it? I'm not a kid anymore, but I still need you guys to listen to me. So there's a certain steadiness to the approach, like bad approaches in general. Say the kids insult your outfit and you genuinely get hurt by that. Well, that could undermine your, respect. Or you strike back at them like, well, your outfit isn't looking so good either. Or you ramp up your anger. You're like, okay, that's 2 demerits, you're grounded, or whatever kind of, disciplinary system you have. If you get real rattled by things, like, they'll lose respect for you. So you want to be able to hang with them, but you don't want to be like them, if that makes any sense. Again, it depends. Some kids, they will respect you more if you do react. So it's hard to know. The other thing is don't say anything that you can't follow through on. Like, don't say there's going to be consequences unless you know that there will be, particularly that your team will support you on. A helpful tip that I did was trying to get one-on-one time with people, because these kids are attention deprived, and when you pay attention to them, they kind of eat it up. And when it's one-on-one time, they're not trying to show off in front of the other kids, and so a lot of times you can really bond one-on-one. Just take them. One of the things in these residential treatment facilities is similar in prison, I suppose. The inmates get very focused on tiny privileges. Like when you're in prison, from what I've seen in the movies, they get very focused on things like extra food or cigarettes and this sort of thing. Little things. Well, it's similar to these residential treatment facilities. They get, because their lives are so limited and their options are so limited, they can become very focused on like certain kind of snacks or outings or something. And so if you have that freedom, you could just initiate certain kinds of programs like, okay, people, today, if you follow my directions throughout the day, then you and all your other people who follow the directions all day, I'm going to take you all to a movie. Or I'm going to take you to a pizza thing, or I'm going to take you to the video game place, or I'm going to take you to bumper cars, or I'm going to take you just out, just to get out of the... Kids, sometimes if you do it right, they will become obsessed with winning whatever you're trying to give out there. Or you have like, I don't know, an iPod that you want to give out, or I don't know, whatever within reason budget-wise. It could even just be like a bag of Doritos, for crying out loud. Like sometimes, these kids, they'll just go crazy. Now, of course, you have to run that by your supervisor. But outings can be pretty low maintenance, right? Going to the mall with 3 kids that were good during the day and follow rules. Like, kids love that kind of stuff. Get out of town, get out of the facility, stretch their legs. So using that can help, but you got to be charismatic with it. You can't just be like, so everyone, I have a thing. You got to like get in their face and be like, okay, people, today I'm going to start a thing and you're going to listen to this, and whoever wants to, and maybe the first few times the kids, they're not into it, but if you stay consistent, they'll get in line with it. Because the thing is as you've been listening to this podcast and the attachment stuff, is that in all likelihood, all of them have massive attachment injuries. And so if someone shows them consistency and resilience and is good and pays attention to them and has energy toward them, even if it's clunky and sort of inexperienced, they will eat it up. But they have to trust you, right? And you're asking that. It's like, how do I get them to trust me? Consistency, man. Like, now, part of the problem with some of these residential treatment things is like the kids are kind of temporary. Like they'll only be in there for a few weeks or a couple months, and that's not really enough time. So that's why I want to just bring it back to like, you got to know what's possible and you got to lower your expectations to that. It's tough, given your circumstances. You might be doomed in terms of all your hopes. There might be no way to actually get any of them to really open up and trust you in a way that you really hope. There might be no way to see any kind of improvement in any of the kids the way that you hope to, given the circumstances and your coworkers and the lack of leadership and all that kind of stuff. And so part of it is just like, I'm going to do what I can, but I have to realize that there's not much I can do. And that's a failing of the system. If we had more money, allocated tax dollars to this sort of thing, we could actually make a difference. And some group homes are. I mean, like I said, the two group homes I worked in had excellent therapists, had excellent supervisors, had excellent workers. And I was like coming into it going like, wow, that woman is so good with the kids. I remember I had this one supervisor that just knew how to control all of them. She wasn't there all the time, though, was the thing. But I would watch her when she would walk in, like all the kids would snap to attention. She knew exactly what to say. She was very firm, but she was nice. And I never even got close to what she did. Part of it wasn't really my gig. I didn't really expect to be doing that long term, and I didn't. But anyway, so the bottom line is I hope you're getting paid really well, because this sort of work is rough. So, all right, let's go on to another email. But first, let's take a break. All right, we're back from the break. This next email is from patron Lucas. He writes, "My name is Lucas, and I am a 16-year-old boy from Denmark. I've gained a huge interest in psychology over the past year or so, and I dream of being a therapist one day. I have fallen in love with the subject and with the thought of helping people get through traumas and getting back to a happy life. I spoke to my mother about it, and she immediately turned down the idea. Her argument is that it takes a huge mental toll on therapists to listen to people's sad stories, and you're not actually able to help them with their actual problems like physical abuse. She says that I am way too sensitive and I would, quote, take their problems with me home. Take my, problems home. Basically, that I would care too much and it would make me emotionally cold, as it has made every other therapist she knows this way. It really worries me, as she very well could be right. I want to hear a therapist's take on this. Do you agree with her? What other options do I have? I'm thinking of becoming a psychologist or a professor in psychology, but that would take a lot of experience, right? End of email. Yeah, so just answering your last question, becoming a psychoanalyst or a professor, it takes a lot of experience. You're 16 years old. It might be 10, 12 years before you even see your first client. Maybe not that long, but it kind of depends. So it's a big undertaking that you shouldn't do lightly. So I don't know you and I don't know your mom. I don't know what she's seeing. She very well could be right about you. She's your mom. She cares about you. She knows you better than other people. Maybe everything she's telling to you is right. I don't know. But in general, therapists don't take their clients' problems home with them. It's a huge myth. Even people who are very sensitive to that sort of thing. I mean, I've trained hundreds of people, thousands maybe. I have seen a wide variety of people who are very sensitive to their clients' issues. And there are definitely some people who are more sensitive to their clients' issues, but I've never seen it crush anybody. And I've never seen it ruin someone's career or life. It might affect people's lives, but it's not intolerable. There might be intolerable moments, like a day or two out of a month, but with time and with experience, with support, with supervision, with your own therapy, you'll get through it. The vast majority of people do. I think I've only experienced maybe one or two people who couldn't handle it. And I'm not even sure if it was the clients they couldn't handle, but like certain aspects of the work that they couldn't handle, or the stress of their challenge, their perfectionism, that kind of thing. But yeah, most therapists, in fact, the vast majority, don't take their clients' problems home with them, in general, to the point where it actually like degrades their life. It's the nice thing about being a professional, though, is that, so one thing I realized early in my career was that for a lot of my life, I had been trying to be a therapist with a lot of people, friends and other people. But I was never really getting fully satisfied because, of course, my friends didn't think of me as their therapist, but I was really trying to help them. Then when I became a therapist, it became so much easier, and I stopped trying to therapize my friends and family because I had an outlet for my energies. And so, that was another big help, if that makes any sense. That kind of relates to what you're talking. Anyway. Also, generally speaking, it doesn't take a huge mental toll on therapists. That's another myth. Your mom also talks about that therapists just listen to sad stories. This is another myth. It's a total misunderstanding, a misconceptualization of the reality of therapy. I, as a therapist, have been practicing for over 20 years. I have never once thought that my job was just listening to sad stories. I mean, clients come in to talk about a lot of things, and sometimes they're sad, for sure. But usually sadness is not the main sort of focus. Usually it's hurt, confusion, anger, dreams that they want to have. They just want to vent things that are going well. People will sit down and say, my marriage is going better. Let me tell you about it. And we'll talk, great. What are you doing well? So it runs the gamut in terms of like the emotionality of a session. So, we don't just, people who have that point of view, I find, have a very stigmatized view of what therapy is, that, clients just come in and they complain about their lives, and a therapist just listens and strokes their ego and says, it's not your fault. And that's what therapy is. It's like, no, that's not what therapy is. Now, your mom also said something like, you can't actually change the circumstances of their life. And that's true. Like, we can't go to their home and stop their parents from abusing them, for sure. But we can absolutely help them change their lives in very meaningful ways. And we can actually treat things about them that will actually change. I mean, I have literally cured people of their post-traumatic stress disorder. And I will gladly take responsibility for that because it was me. Now, the client had to go along with it, and the client had to do the majority of the work, but I was the one that did it in the same way that, I don't know, like I coached someone to get a gold medal in the Olympics. If I'm a coach and I was there, helping them, now the athlete did all the work, but I was there telling them what to do, and I was there supporting them, and I was, I knew the regiment. I knew that if they didn't have me, they wouldn't have been able to do it. I have been a part of that. I've helped to cure people of their PTSD. I've helped to cure people of their personality disorders, where they had absolute borderline personality disorder, and 3 years later, they did not. I've helped to cure people's drug addiction to heroin, alcohol, all sorts of things. And so on. I know that about myself. I have the track record. Most therapists, if not all, do have track records like that. So, this notion that like therapy is pointless and, you can't really change people's lives and it's just a bunch of people complaining and therapists just saying it's not your fault. That's not what therapy is. That's not what any therapist sets out to do. Your mom also claims that it will make you emotionally cold. That's not usually what happens. Now, you certainly can become burnt out. And, Denmark, I don't know if this is where you say you're from Denmark. It sounds like that's where you're living. I don't know what the mental health system is like in Denmark. I have a hard time believing it's that different from the United States, but it could be. And it's possible that the system is really broken in Denmark and a lot of therapists are burnt out. I don't know. But in general, in my city, it doesn't make people emotionally cold at all. In fact, it probably produces the opposite. I have become much more compassionate towards my fellow man as I, gain experience as a therapist. Because with every client, with everyone I talk to, I am extended to understand human beings in more deeper, real ways. And stereotypes and distancing in my mind is more and more shed as I grow older. I hope listeners out there, that I have compassion for people that I don't agree with, politicians I don't agree with. I have compassion for those people. I don't want to insult the way their hair looks or the way their hands look or their weight or the way that they talk or something. I find that to be really mean. If you disagree with their political stance and you disagree with how they vote on things, then, that's your duty as an American. But to insult people, like, that's just not cool. That's hurtful. And it goes both ways, and so I don't participate in that kind of thing. I don't want to ridicule anybody. It hurts me to see other people ridicule people. And that has been at least partially due to my expansion of my compassion through therapy. The big speech I always give the therapist, and I've said this before, is before you decided to become a therapist, you could be a regular person. Upon deciding to become a therapist and entering graduate school, you can no longer be a normal person, in that you can't just section off certain human beings as the other. Everyone does this. Everyone's just like, Democrats are the other, Republicans are the other, immigrants are the other, women are the other, people who believe in astrology are the other, atheists are the other. Like, everyone has this distancing, those people who have long toenails are the other. If you're a regular human being, you have the freedom to do that. You can just be like, those people are dumb. They're gross. I don't want to talk to them. They should go away. I wish they would fall off the face of the planet. People who are on YouTube showing off their cars, for example. Whatever your thing is, I don't like those people. When you become a therapist, you can't be that way anymore. You can't otherize people, because those people are going to come to you and they depend on you, and you have an ethical responsibility, a moral responsibility to have full compassion for that person and not to have any less compassion for them because they represent a cultural group that you don't identify with or you're not cool with, or your cultural group is supposed to hate that cultural group. You can't be that way anymore. You can no longer walk around and say, oh, gross, ew, you can't do that anymore. It's natural to do it, but you have to strive not to, because those people are going to come into your office and you have to welcome them emotionally with open arms. So through that, one actually becomes more compassionate and less emotionally cold. So, now, again, some people get burnt out and they become emotionally cold for sure. The bottom line is, Lucas, is that you are young. You are 16. You have many years to think about this. The likelihood that this current dream will become the dream in the end is actually pretty low. Research shows that people change their career aspirations at least a handful of times before they actually decide on an early career in their mid-20s. So, just now, maybe you'll stick with it. Maybe you'll change it 5 times and it'll come back to this. I don't know. Only you will find out that. I mean, we'll all find out that. Only you are on that journey. So, keep exploring it. Keep your options open. You'll figure it out. Keep me updated. Let me know how it goes. I'm certainly here to help I help a lot of people with their careers, and so I'm a good resource for that. You always want to have mentors and people that know the ropes. Now, I don't know Denmark, so you'll want to find someone in your area whom you can look up to and that's the other thing that I'll tell you to do is find a therapist in your area whom you can ask these questions of. Because I don't know, maybe all Danish therapists are completely burnt out. I don't know. Maybe your mom's right. So find people in your area and bounce ideas off them. You don't want to necessarily go to the general public when you're talking about this career, because generally speaking, most people are not going to be supportive because of all the myths and the stigma around this sort of thing. So you have to find people who know what it's actually like and are not as biased, I guess. Anyway, let's go on to another email. But first, let's do some announcements. Please become a patron of the podcast. And if you can, become an upper tier patron. That's always cool when people do that. You get more swag. But also, it just lets us know that you care even more if you can afford it. Also, review us on iTunes. I keep asking people. I haven't looked recently, but eventually we're going to read all the most recent. We did an episode a year or so ago where we read all the reviews on iTunes, particularly the more interesting ones. And so if you can go to iTunes and leave reviews, the reason why we want people to do that is because the more reviews, the more likely our podcast is going to be listed as a featured podcast, from what I understand. And so then more people find us, that kind of thing. Also know that when you become a patron, you will get access to all of our premium episodes, which are arguably our best episodes. Also, you will not have to listen to ads. Also, a certain portion of your monthly pledge goes towards various charities that we support. We've raised thousands of dollars for a lot of charities, which is fantastic. Thank you so much, patrons, for doing that. Also, if you want to contact me, go to the website, use the Contact Us page. That's the best way. Do not contact me through Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or anything. Go to the website, use the Contact Us page. Many of you are doing that, which is great. Join us on YouTube Live, Thursdays, 2 o'clock Seattle time. Also, all of our major conversations happen on Facebook. I'll often throw out a question for people like, I'm prepping for an episode on this. What are your thoughts about this? And I genuinely will use your comments to help me prep for episodes. So you could really help me out if you join the Facebook page and participate in that. Let's see. If you are a patron right now and you're having trouble accessing older episodes or episodes in general, make sure you contact me. I can help you with that. Also, what else here on my little list? That's probably about it. Okay, so the next email here is, let's read it. Okay, this next email is from anonymous patron. They ask, I wanted to ask you as a colleague about your experience with the very specific dissociation I'm seeing with clients with combat-related PTSD. I've been in practice for as long as you have. I work in England as a psychotherapist. Combat-related PTSD seems so unique. Worldwide, soldiers are suffering. I've discovered something that is incredibly common in combat-related PTSD. They call it doing a runner. Doing a runner. Doing a runner is not going AWOL. When they do a runner, the soldier will just start running away, often without preparation or adequate protection. It seems dissociative because they lose hours or days during these states of memory. It seems to be a major concern to many in the military. Many soldiers go missing this way. Is this something unique to veterans? Certainly traumatized clients dissociate, and some do go through fugue states, but this seems different to me. I can't seem to find enough research or literature on this specific phenomenon. I'm researching it out of fascination, and I plan to write an article for the British Association of Counseling and Psychotherapy's journal. End of email. Yeah, first off, it sounds to me that it's similar to the second season of Serial. If remember the hit podcast Serial, that was about Adnan Syed. Well, the second season was about a military person, service member, United States, who just walked away from his post in, I believe, Afghanistan, and was captured by some people and was held hostage for many years, or for a long time anyway. And a lot of people felt bad for him because he was a hostage, but a lot of the military people were like, well, why did he just walk away from his post? And there's all sorts of speculation, like he hated the military, or he wanted to join the enemy, or he did something like this, where he just did a runner and just, had some sort of traumatic reaction and just wandered off. So, there's a lot of speculation and, no real clear evidence as to what happened. I mean, we have to kind of rely on his account of why he did it. And it's hard to believe him necessarily. So it's something that I've heard about before, but so to answer your question, I will say that this isn't really my area. I haven't heard of it. I tried to do a little bit of, I tried to find some research on it by searching my, journal database, but I couldn't find anything that specifically discussed what you're talking about. It's possible that it has been written about, but I don't know the search words. I used a number of different search words. Doing a runner came up with nothing. So yeah, I too can't really find any research on it. From your description, yeah, it sounds like dissociation. Trauma leads to dissociative defenses to defend against the trauma. We want to check out as a way of coping. It's better to not be around mentally when the trauma is happening. It protects us. And then later, when we're triggered, the defense will be activated, sometimes when it's not adaptive to do so. And the signs are lack of memory, acting strange, not, these kinds of things. So it's possible, that according to description, you have service members who are just running away or walking away from their post without preparation, without concern for their safety or their job, and they don't remember why they did it. Certainly is in line with dissociation for sure. And we could imagine why that would happen. Being in a war zone or having that sort of job can be highly stressful and could absolutely trigger dissociation. What I will say is that for most people, they will have had to have developed a dissociative defense when they were very young, meaning that they were terrorized when they were, 0 through 5, and developed a dissociative potential back then that was triggered probably throughout their life, but particularly while they were in the military in a state of stress. So that's one thing to think about. It's not common for people who didn't already have a dissociative defense to develop it for the first time in their adult life as a soldier. But, it's possible, particularly if there were sort of like mild dissociative defenses that were developed early in life. Hard to know. So there's that. Also, it could be some kind of rational response to the stress of war. Like you're in for a lot of military folks, there are brief moments of terror and long moments of just of boredom, But the moments of boredom, every soldier knows, particularly in certain contexts, that at any moment, like a mortar round could kill them, or if there was a raid from the enemy all of a sudden. So there's this awareness that at any given moment, like a bullet could go through your head, literally. And people are dying all the time. And so it's a very rational thing to be terrified. So when we're terrified, it's also, somewhat rational to just run. And so it's possible that it's not dissociative at all. It's just sort of a desperate act of a desperate situation. Also, it could be panic, disorder, panic attack of some sort. One can lose memory during a panic attack. If your brain is denied oxygen, and that's something that happens during the physiological response of panic. Memories might not be encoded quite right. Also, lack of sleep. You can imagine being in a war zone and your sleep is disrupted quite a bit. A lot of these military folks will do weird shifts, where they do 3, night shifts and then 1 all-day shift, and their sleep is all wacky. And so sometimes you can have waking dreams where you just wander off. Essentially, you're sleepwalking. Head injuries from just, random things and from IEDs can cause there to be some anomalous behavior and motivation. Drug use could also lead to problems. And frankly, malingering, meaning faking to get transferred to a better location, could also be part of it. I don't know. I'm just speculating. So yeah, sounds interesting. I don't know anything about it. Let me know. If you plan to write an article, send me the article so I can learn more and so I can share it on our Facebook page. Okay, this next email is from a upper tier anonymous patron. They write, I have bipolar that I manage well most of the time. Recently, I had a short bout of mania. Since my diagnosis 2 years ago, I couldn't remember having any mania. Just consistent hypomania during my up cycle. And experiencing the mania was very scary to me. I rarely show much emotion during my sessions with my therapist, but this recent event was something I struggled to talk about. During my session, as I talked about it, I became visibly upset, which is something very uncomfortable for me to show. And I noticed that my therapist was reflecting my emotion, and I sensed that he was getting uncomfortable as well, almost mirroring my exact emotions. This has happened in past sessions, but it is when we have talked about my depression. Again, in session, I would get upset about feeling so depressed and see that he was also becoming upset. Several months ago, he actually brought it up, that he gets a helpless feeling when I am struggling. And for the record, he is not helpless and does a great job getting me through those moments. None of this feels alarming to me, but I do want to discuss it further with him at some point. I guess I am just really curious if this is projective identification. Is it really is it related to transference and countertransference, or is it something else? End of email. Yeah, sounds like you're in good hands. You have a good therapist. You feel like your therapist is helping you and has gotten you through some ups and downs in your life, which is very hard to do. And so you have a very good therapist. Your therapist mirrors your emotions, meaning that at the very least, your therapist really notices your emotions, which is fantastic and can feel very good as a client to know that your therapist gets you. And your therapist is moved. Your therapist is moved by your emotions. Your therapist has emotional reactions to you. Your therapist is willing and confident and, moral enough to say that he also feels helpless when you're in a difficult spot. And he is confident enough and likes you enough to share that with you, which, can be a very powerful idea of just like, okay, we're both in this together and we both don't know what to do. And we both are, very affected by the situation. That's an incredible experience to have as a client and as a therapist. So yeah, you're asking, should I keep discussing it with the therapist? Should I? Yeah, absolutely. Just keep discussing it with them. That's what therapist is for. And then you ask, is it projective identification, transference, countertransference? Yeah, it is. It depends on what we mean by the terms. The definition that I use for countertransference is one that a lot of people use, but not everybody, which is that countertransference is just the emotional and urge reactivity that therapists have in relation to the client's material. And so as you are exhibiting sadness and depression or mania or difficulty, that is producing a feeling in your therapist, which is what you're observing as him being upset and as him feeling hopeless. And that's, it's countertransference. Meaning that it is touching something in him, maybe he identifies with it somehow, or, it reminds him of something, or it's just something deep within him that, emerges for him in reaction to you. Is it transference? Hard to tell because you're not really talking much about your own kind of issues of transference from your early relationships to him, so I don't know. Is it projective identification? Could be. Again, it depends on what is going on for you. Because if you have bipolar and you're going through what we might call a biological downswing in your moods, then it doesn't necessarily have to do with any early relationships that you had. It just has to do with your biological condition of bipolar. And so you're struggling with that, and your therapist is having a feeling about that. And, we don't need to go beyond that in terms of conceptualization. But it's possible that your bipolar is actually related to early childhood things and early internalized relationships, and you're recreating that with him. Like you are, maybe you had a depressed parent, and your parent made you feel very helpless in relation to their depression. And you internalize that relationship, and then you recreate it with your therapist, where you transferred to him how you felt when you were young, and you become your parent. So you are the one with the mood disorder, and your therapist is now the one feeling helpless, trying to help. So that could be projective identification. I don't know. You didn't indicate anything along those lines. That doesn't mean it's unhealthy or anything. It just, you have bipolar, and you have hypomania, and you have depression, and that's terrible, and it's unfair to you. It's terrible. It can be a terrible condition that can be very distressing and very difficult to deal with. And you have a good therapist who's helping you with that and who's willing to get into the trenches with you, which is great. So the other thing I'll say is, when I've treated people with bipolar and major depression, I almost always feel helpless too. It's a very difficult, I was talking earlier, it's like I can cure people of their PTSD. I have very strong confidence I can, if the client is willing to do the work, eliminate phobias and panic disorders, social anxiety. I'm very confident that I can help people with addictions in the long term. I'm very confident I can help people with personality disorders in the long term. But when it comes to bipolar and major depression, I am not very confident. Maybe it's because I haven't really specialized in that work, because I haven't, but I've certainly had dozens of clients, particularly with major depression, not so much with bipolar, but a fair amount, maybe a couple dozen with bipolar as well over the years. Not so much in recent times, but in my early years for sure. And it's the rough part about major depression, any sort of mood disorder, is that one, they tend not to react all that great to treatment. Meaning that with PTSD, for example, if you give me enough time and the client's willing to do the work, we can eliminate the symptoms forever. But when it comes to major depression, a lot of it is just symptom management and attempting to take away the deep lows, or knowing what to do when you have the deep lows. And that's a different prognosis, and it's a different approach. And there's less indication that your therapy is actually doing anything. When I test people pre and post treatment for PTSD, even complex PTSD, and the measure clearly shows that they definitely had PTSD in the beginning, and at the end they didn't, and they had zero symptoms. They're all zeros at the end. That's very clear. But when you're working with someone who has major depression, you might see over time, like a slight reduction in the severity of the symptoms. You might see an increase in the ability to cope, or this sort of thing. But when people are depressed, man, it sucks. It is no joke, man. It is breathtaking sometimes to be with people who are in that state. As a therapist, because you're there to help, you're there to absorb, you're there to have empathy, you're there to be with them through the difficult times, and it's tough, And I've done the work, and I've helped people, and I have a lot of colleagues. Therapy can literally save people's lives, keep them from killing themselves, keep them from drinking themselves into a hole. So I'm not going to say that I don't have some hope, and because there definitely is some, but it's tough. It's a very, very difficult condition. If it's moderate to severe, it's very difficult to treat. Now, I will say for some people, they can see symptom relief really quickly. I can remember one client I had very early on who came to me with major depression, and within a few months, she had no symptoms, and that sustained for many months. And so, I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen, but I've been with some clients for years who it just seemed like no matter what we did, the cycles would just come. And when they came, it was like a bomb going off in their soul, and it would just lay waste for a couple months. It's tough. The suffering is real, man. Like it's just no joke. And so for your therapist to be with you and upset and to feel helpless is congruent and normal and rational. It doesn't mean that there isn't hope. I always have hope. Absolutely. It doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't helpful, because it probably is. You're still alive, you're still trucking, you're still improving, you're still going, you're still doing the thing. And, sometimes that's the victory. You are winning the race, and I commend you for that. So anyway, if you have other questions about that, let me know. All right, well, let's adjourn, as I sometimes say in class, this podcast episode, and move on to our next thing that we are going to do. Whatever you're doing after this, or while. Some people are driving or doing laundry. If you're like me, you're in the car, you're on your run, you're doing your laundry, you're taking the dog for a walk, you're organizing your bookshelf, you're wrapping presents. What else do I do when I'm... you're organizing your receipts for your small business. You're, what else do I do when I'm listening? Working out, lifting weights, walking from your car to your office, all those kinds of things. It's now time for us to continue doing those things without me connected to you. And please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.